And thank you so much for being here with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. Glad to be back. Third year in a row for me on this stage.
Third year in a row. That's pretty good. So you must be an old hat at this by now. But for those of us in the audience who are maybe less familiar with this particular company, I wonder if you could give a little bit of an overview about who you are.
Well, thank you. NOW, the National Organization for Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Technology, and the name is a little bit misleading because we're not only focusing on hydrogen and fuel cells, but on all technologies for alternative fuels and alternative drivetrains in transport. We are a government-owned company, and we are especially supporting the German Ministry of Transport and Digital Infrastructure in the field of electric mobility, hydrogen and fuel cells. That also includes building strategies for these technologies, as well as funding opportunities for investment, as well as research and development in these technologies.
Okay, so you guys are predominantly involved in the transport sector for that sort of thing. Is this both, I notice in your title we have commercial transport, but is it exclusively commercial or also for personal use type things?
It is everything that's related to electric mobility. So we have funding programs for recharging infrastructure. We have funding programs that focus on research and development. But what we see at the moment is that the commercial sector is one of the main sectors where alternative fuels, alternative drivetrains, and especially the fuel cell technology is gaining some pace, I would say.
Okay, could you speak a little bit to why you feel like the commercial area is so important? I mean, most individuals own cars as well. What is it that makes the commercial sector you really think is going to have a big impact or worthy of close inspection?
So, you cannot rely only on the commercial sector. Definitely passenger transport is one of the big energy consumers in transport. But there's still 1/3 of today's fuel consumption coming from heavy-duty trucks, commercial transport, and that energy consumption comes from a quite limited number of vehicles. So in commercial transport, heavy-duty trucks, you have a limited number of vehicles with quite a high use of fuel at the moment. So you can have a really important impact on also CO2 emissions, but also NOx or also sound and noise emissions when you focus on the commercial sector.
So by focusing on commercial, you are hoping that you can have a very high impact with slightly lower complications because you can have fewer vehicles that need to fall in line with this decarbonized fuel plan.
Right, but on the other hand, I would have to say that it is that also the performance needs. So what is needed for the application in heavy-duty transport is much higher than in the passenger sector. So if you look at technologies that fulfill the needs for transport in passenger cars, you're very fast at the point where you look at battery electric cars, which fulfill already a high part of the needs of passengers or passenger cars. But when you look at the commercial sector with higher haulage capacity, rising haulage capacity, with performance needs for the vehicles, there's quite an advantage for hydrogen and fuel cells.
Right, because it's not just a higher energy need due to driving a heavier, bigger vehicle. it also doesn't make it as much sense to have commercial transport only within a 100-kilometer radius or whatever the battery electric vehicles can get these days.
Well, that is one part where inner city logistics, where you can use battery electric trucks also, but especially with a view on the long range, long haul transport. At the moment, with a diesel fueled truck, you have like 1,400 kilometers of range. That is something, if you want to fulfill that with a battery truck, you will need like more than 10 tons of battery to have it in your truck.
All right, so you would need a massive battery to make that sort of thing happen. Okay, so it's lovely to hear that this type of hydrogen fuel cell technology may be well suited to heavy duty trucks. But at the moment, as far as I know, we aren't actually seeing that many trucks on the road that are using it, if any. So what needs to be done to change this from an interesting and positive concept to something that we're actually going to see?
Well, that is something I think we're right at the tipping point at the moment, because with the new EU regulation on CO2 standards for heavy-duty trucks, there is the need for truck manufacturers to introduce some kind of alternative transport mode in their trucks. And as I said, for the battery electric trucks, there's a part of the market that could be fulfilled with battery electric trucks. But looking at the long-haul trucks, you will have to find another solution, and there hydrogen fuel cells are one of the most interesting possibilities. And as far as we see it, nearly all of the truck manufacturers are looking into the technology, and there are other players coming on the market that try to introduce trucks with hydrogen. For example, Nikola, that are dealing with that already in the US and coming to Europe in the next years. But also, so the Hyundai, who started with 1,000 trucks in Switzerland.
Oh, okay. I'd just like to briefly go back to, you mentioned that truck manufacturers in Europe need to be doing a little bit of a redesign to fall in with EU expectations. Can you give us just a really quick rundown on what sort of decreases in emissions we are hoping to actually see? What are the targets?
Well, the targets are quite ambitious for trucks. Compared to today, manufacturers need to reduce emissions by 30% until 2030. So there's a step in between 2025 with 15% of reduction, and 2030, 30% of reduction. So that is something that I guess will not be achieved by only rising efficiency of the internal combustion engine, and hybridization will be one part, but there will be the need to also introduce another technology, and that is electric mobility in the first case, with battery as well as hydrogen and fuel cells.
Okay. And some of these very ambitious goals are not just within the heavy trucking, they also include in other areas of the mobility sector, is that right?
Well, there's so the targets are only for the trucks, the CO2 targets, but there are other targets for passenger cars as well as light duty vehicles, where we see like more of so there's more the chance to fulfill the needs with battery electric vehicles, but still there are good reasons to look also into hydrogen and fuel cells for light duty vehicles. For example, for service vehicles that are like 24/7 working on the road, or well, that need to be really or where you can rely on that you just jump in and drive, and you're not have to rely on a filled battery.
Right, jump in and go, and no need to worry about having an overnight filling time. Although I have heard that there are some good progress in like quick filling battery type stuff, of course, but definitely there's hopefully space in the industry for both battery electric vehicles as well as hydrogen fuel cells. They can be complementary instead of competing.
Well, I'm sure we will need, and that's one more reason why we look into these technologies. We will need all of them to fulfill the really ambitious climate targets that the German government set. We will have to reduce CO2 emissions in transport by 40 to 42% until 2030. So that is another driver for alternative fuels and alternative drivetrains in the transport sector.
Okay, thank you. So just changing tracks just a little bit. Something as a Canadian that I find quite interesting about Germany is its reliance on the railway system. And the railway or train system is something that I think that the hydrogen sector can actually do quite well, as you could have a centralized fueling station because all the trains can't deviate off the tracks, at least not without a lot of damage. Is there any projects being done through NOW for the train system, and where might those be located?
Well, that's something we see over the last 2, 3, 4 years in Germany, that hydrogen fuel cells in the rail area and in trains are really interesting. Already quite a business case to use like diesel trains that are now on track to reduce emissions and to reduce the need for diesel with introducing hydrogen and fuel cell trains. Alstom was one of the projects. They have their fuel cell train that is already driving in Germany in some area, and I guess nearly all over Germany there's the need to look into railway that is not electrified now, but where we see good business case for hydrogen and fuel cells. And okay. Siemens, for example, is also working on trains. Stadler. There are a couple of activities going on, and well, some of them were funded through NOW by the Ministry of Transport.
Okay, although for the train projects that do exist, are they mostly commercial or passenger trains at this point?
Well, there is mostly passenger trains, which is the first step to go. But, well, as you said, trains are quite a good way to introduce hydrogen and fuel cells.
Right. I mean, I know that actually being on the train would probably be the exact same experience as any other train, but I think it'd be super fun to ride a fuel cell train. So I think that'd be great. At this point, if there's any questions from the audience, feel free just to put your hand up and I will bring the microphone down to you. Please say your name and hold the microphone.
Jean-Marie Poignon. I would like you to summarize again the question. Maybe you did not answer it clearly. What are the next steps to be done there? You asked it, but I did not quite understand the answer.
So next steps in commercial transport on the road. So first of all, we need vehicles. We need trucks. There are quite a lot of projects going on to develop hydrogen and fuel cell trucks in the different sizes, but at the moment there's nothing on the market what you can buy as a commercially trucks that you can use for your everyday transport needs. But as I said, there's quite a lot going on at the moment, developments that are pushed by the CO2 regulation on EU level, and so I guess we will see some vehicles hopefully quite soon.
So for NOW, it's not just the policy that you guys are pushing to get these trucks on the actual available market, or is it? Or is there any funding sources that people can apply to?
Definitely there are. That's one part of what we do as NOW. For the Ministry of Transport, we are like coordinating and improving the funding possibilities. We have quite a lot of possibilities to fund, for example, research and development through the National Innovation Program for Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Technologies, as well as projects. So there's also investment funding for trucks, and well, quite a broad range of funding possibilities. If you're interested, come to our booth right over there. B59.
Sorry, along with that, so I know you guys are a national organization. In order to be eligible for this funding, is it required to be a German candidate or a German company to be eligible?
You have to have your company has to be based in Germany, but it is still possible to have like partners in the project that are not from Germany. So
okay, so it's someone needs to be in Germany, but it's possible to have a more expanded network that's eligible to be part of the NOW network.
Right.
All right, if there are no more questions at this point, I think I'll take the opportunity of holding the mic myself to ask the final one. Sure. So we talked a bit about the trucking and the transportation sector, and we have some incredibly ambitious targets. What else is on the horizon? Of course, you're not just going to be doing policy making. Is there anything that you are super excited for to look forward to in the coming years that maybe we'll hear about next Hanover Fair? Or the one after, or the one after?
Well, I guess there's so much happening in the transport sector in the next years that like the next 10 or 20 Hanover Fairs, there's enough to tell. We see that on the one hand, because of the targets for climate protection, on the other hand also because of the EU targets for CO2 regulation for the vehicles, as well as introducing renewables in the energy system, also for transport, things are changing at the moment, and there's quite a run on alternative technologies in the transport sector. And what we are really excited about is to see that also hydrogen and fuel cells are seen as one of the main technologies that are needed for the energy transition in transport. So I guess over the next 1 to 3 years, we will see quite some change in the market.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing that change, going from the theoretical to the reality. So at this point, I'd just like to say thank you so much for being with us here today. This has been quite informative. It's always nice to kind of get a little bit of an update of what things are happening at a national level. So thanks once again. And if you have any further questions, I'm sure you'd be more than happy to chat with you at booth B59, which is just over that way. So take a wander over there and check it out. Thank you.
Thank you very much.